was late October and the storm was heavy, soaking everything it touched. The wind howled through the trees, bending them unnaturally. Despite the storm's power, there was an eerie silence in the small town of Redfield. Elena, a woman in her late 20s, had just moved into a cottage on the edge of town, hoping for some peace away from her busy city life. But something about the place felt strange. It started on her first night. The house was old but well maintained. The walls creaked and the floors groaned with every step. The storm started right after she finished unpacking, and she nervously joked to herself that it was just a coincidence. The wind rattled the windows as she sat on the couch, trying to relax. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows, and the sound of rain tapping on the roof was comforting, almost too comforting. Then she heard it, a soft whisper, barely noticeable at first, like someone calling her name. Elena! Her heart raced. She turned toward the door, expecting to see someone there, but no one was in sight, just the rain. Elena. This time the voice was closer, coming from the corner of the room, just beyond the light of the candles. Elena stood up, her legs shaking. She grabbed a flashlight and pointed it toward the corner. Nothing. The house groaned again, louder this time. Elena tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the storm. She walked to the kitchen to make some tea, but as she passed a hallway mirror, she saw a shadow move across the glass. She turned quickly, but again, there was nothing. Only the sound of the rain, now pouring harder against the windows. Her eyes moved around the hallway. The whisper came again, clearer now. Elena. It wasn't just a soft sound anymore. It was a voice calling her. Without thinking, she grabbed her car keys. She couldn't stay here. The air felt heavy, suffocating. She opened the door to leave, and the rain hit her like a wall. She ran to her car, jumped in, and slammed the door shut. The car started, and she drove off quickly, hoping to escape the tension of the house. But the storm grew worse. The road, usually easy to drive on, was now slick and dangerous. She could barely see through the windshield as the wipers struggled against the rain. Suddenly, the headlights flickered. The car jerked, like something grabbed it from below. Elena hit the brakes, but the car slid off the road and into a ditch. It stopped with a screech. Shaking, she got out of the car and into the rain. Her phone had no signal, and the storm kept getting stronger. With no other choice, she started walking back to the house. The air felt thick, and something didn't feel right. When she reached the front door, she saw a figure standing on the porch. It was cloaked in shadows, its shape wrong, shifting in a way that felt unnatural. Elena. The voice came again, but now it was deeper, darker. Terrified, Elena turned and ran. The figure was behind her, its whispers growing louder, its breath hot against her neck. The rain was pouring harder, and the wind screamed in her ears. She ran through the woods around the house, but it felt like the trees were closing in on her, their branches scratching at her skin. She didn't stop running until she found herself back at the cottage. There was no escape. The whispers were everywhere now, drowning her in fear. Elena? Then, in a moment of understanding, she realized the voice wasn't calling her. It was warning her. Looking up, she saw it, what had been following her. A twisted, dark figure with hollow black eyes, watching her with pure malice. The rain was still falling, but she could hear it over the storm. The thing was waiting, and Elena was trapped.
After college, I took on a job as a maintenance worker for an old apartment complex. It wasn't glamorous, but the building was full of quirky tenants who kept things interesting. A lot of them were elderly, and some of them were downright eccentric. It wasn't unusual for them to offer me food, old books, or knickknacks they didn't need anymore. I was young, living paycheck to paycheck, so I accepted anything they gave me with a grateful smile. One of the tenants, a woman named Eleanor, was especially kind. She was a bit reclusive, but always offered me tea when I stopped by to fix something. She lived alone in an apartment that had seen better days, with faded wallpaper and creaky wooden floors. She had a beautiful old mirror in her living room, an antique that she claimed had belonged to her grandmother. She told me it was a family heirloom that had been passed down for generations. It was framed in ornate gold with swirling designs, and it had an odd aura about it, like something out of a Gothic novel. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I'd often find myself staring at it when I was in her apartment, as if the mirror were watching me back. One day, Eleanor asked me to come over and fix a leaky faucet. I was in the middle of a particularly long shift, but she was a sweet lady, so I agreed. When I arrived at her apartment, she wasn't there, which was strange. I knocked several times before deciding to go inside to fix the faucet without disturbing her. As I walked through the quiet apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt heavy, like the kind of tension you feel before a storm. I went into the kitchen and started working on the sink, but something kept drawing my attention toward the living room, where the mirror hung. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't help but glance over. The reflection in the mirror wasn't quite right. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, but when I looked closer, I could see the shape of a person standing in the reflection right behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. My stomach churned with unease. I looked back at the mirror, but now the figure was gone. I tried to shake it off as my imagination running wild, but I couldn't focus on the sink anymore. I quickly finished fixing the faucet and started to leave when I heard a voice, soft and faint, whispering from behind me. "Don't leave." I froze. The voice sounded like Eleanor's, but there was something wrong about it. It was distant, muffled, like it was coming from somewhere deep within the walls. I turned slowly, but the apartment was still empty. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. The next time I saw Eleanor, I asked her about the mirror. She smiled softly, as if she knew exactly what I was talking about, and told me that her grandmother had always warned her about the mirror. It had been passed down to the family for generations, she said, but each person who owned it eventually met a tragic end. Some mirrors, she said, don't just reflect what's in front of them. They take something of you too. I laughed it off, thinking she was just trying to scare me. But as time went on, I couldn't stop thinking about that mirror, and that voice, and the figure in the reflection. A few weeks later, I was working late one night, and I received an urgent call from Eleanor's neighbor. She hadn't been answering her door for days, and they were worried. I rushed over, heart in my throat. The police had to break down the door to get inside. When they did, they found Eleanor in front of that damn mirror, lying on the floor with her eyes wide open and unblinking. Her expression was frozen, as if she had seen something she couldn't escape. They never found out what happened to her. They ruled it as a natural death, but something in my gut told me that wasn't the case. The apartment was cleared out, but I heard later that the mirror was sold off at an estate auction. I don't know where it ended up, but I can tell you one thing. I never went near that building again. And I still can't shake the feeling that the mirror, wherever it is watching me, waiting for its next victim.